In this tutorial, we will walk you through step by step how to sew a beautifully finished waistband onto your wrap skirt. In this tutorial, we'll be sewing the waistband onto our free Frankie wrap skirt, which we have linked below. However, these steps can be applied to other made label wrap skirt patterns as well. If your skirt doesn't have a frill like this one does, we'll highlight the sections where you can skip frill related steps. To start, you should have your fusible interfacing fused to the sections of the pattern that will form the waistband. This provides the waistband with added stability and structure. Any pattern pieces that will form the tie will be left without interfacing to keep the fluidity and drape. To begin assembling the waistband, pin the back waistband to the top front waistband along the short edge with right sides together. Ensure you align the notch in the middle of the short end. This waistband is designed to be pieced together in one specific way, so it's essential to match your notches accurately. Once you have pinned it in place, stitch along the pinned edge using a 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. After sewing, press the seam open. A helpful tip is when you're pressing directly onto interfacing, make sure to use a pressing cloth. This will prevent any potential melting of the interfacing onto your too hot iron. Next, with the waistband right side up, pin the tie to the back waistband matching the notch. Ensure that the sewn seam of the tie is positioned downward. Once pinned, sew a holding seam 0.6 centimeters or 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge. Once sewn, pin the under front waistband onto the back waistband, matching the notch and sandwiching the tie between the pattern pieces. Sew along this pinned edge using a 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. When you get to the tie, remember to backstitch over it for added strength and reinforcement. After you've sewn this section, press the seam open. Next, we will be sewing the waistband to the skirt with right sides together. Beginning from the side of the waistband that extends into the tie, you'll want to align the waistband notch, the one just before the interfacing ends, with the end of the skirt. If you're working with a skirt that features a frill, the seam allowance where the frill attaches to the skirt should have been pressed inwards. After pressing, a holding seam would have been sewn 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch down from the raw edge, creating a neatly folded edge as the end of the skirt. However, if you're working with a skirt without a frill, the skirt will just have a finished edge. Pin the notch to the end of the skirt. Next, continue to match the notches and side seams along the waistline of the skirt, adding as many pins as you need. Be mindful of the tie, ensuring you pull it out of the way so it doesn't get caught once you move on to sewing. As you approach the opposite end of the waistband, match the waistband's end notch with the skirt's folded or finished edge. You'll notice that there's some waistband extending beyond the skirt. We will use this overhang to neatly finish the waistband edge later on. Next, head to the machine and sew your waistband to your skirt using a 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Your skirt should be facing up as you sew. If your skirt has a frill, ensure you're stitching just above it at both the beginning and end points of the waistband. Also, be sure to start and finish the seam with a back stitch. Once sewn with the skirt right side up, press the waistband up. Now we will move on to sewing the tie section of the waistband. Start by folding the tie section in half lengthways with right sides together, pinning in place as you go. We will be sewing the tie using a 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You will want to begin sewing at the point where the skirt ends, back stitching to begin. Then sew down the long side of the tie before pivoting to sew the short end, finishing with a back stitch. Next, we will trim the seam allowance back to 0.6 centimeters or 1/4 of an inch along the short and long end, stopping once you reach the main waistband. For our next step, we will press the long unsewn edge of the waistband up by 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch. Begin this from the point where the waistband transitions into the tie. Remember, if you're pressing directly onto the interfacing, to use a pressing cloth. Now we will finish off the other end of the waistband. Start by unfolding the waistband's end, then pin it right sides together, matching the bottom raw edges. At the machine, adjust your stitch length to 1.9. We will sew along the waistband's short edge, stitching as closely to the skirt's edge as possible. Backstitch at the beginning and end of the seam. Once sewn, turn it right side out and check to ensure everything is hunky-dory. Then trim the seam back to 0.6 centimeters or 1/4 of an inch. Now we have both the waistband end and tie complete. We will flip them right side out. Use a blunt object to poke the waistband and tie ends to create sharp points. You will want to press the tie, rolling the sewn seam to the outside edge with your fingertips. Now we're on to the last phase of sewing the waistband. Start with your skirt facing wrong side up and press the seam of the waistband upwards. This helps to create a nice groove for our stitch in the ditch coming up. Next, you want to pin the folded edge of the waistband so it covers the stitch line along the length of the waistband. As you secure it with pins, ensure that all the final pins are positioned on the front side of the waistband, as we'll be sewing the final waistband stitches on the right side of the skirt. Once pinned, we will move on to our final sewing step, stitch in the ditch. Time to head back to the machine. Lay your skirt with right side facing up. We're about to tackle stitch in the ditch, which is sewing right in the seam groove between the tie and the waistband. Start at the beginning of the waistband, carefully lowering your needle directly into the groove and back stitching, then sew along the length of the waistband, staying in that seam groove as much as possible. Perfecting stitch in the ditch can take some practice. Sew slowly and try focusing on the gap just ahead of where you are stitching. We are using contrasting thread here for the sake of the tutorial, but when you're using matching thread, we promise no one will ever notice if it's not perfect. Finish the seam with a back stitch. After sewing, check out the wrong side of the skirt to ensure the stitches have caught and secured the back side of the waistband. And your waistband is all sewn, looking super beautiful and very professional. Now just add some snaps and you're all done. For those who need it, we have linked a tutorial on sewing snaps onto your waistband linked below. If you love sewing, we've got something to help you plan out your creations. Our awesome and awesomely free PDF sewing planner. Jot down your measurements, hack plans, and supplies for every project and add your fabric swatches and garment sketches. Use one of our 4 croquis models or sketch on the blank planner pages. It also includes a collection planner for organizing swatches and styling ideas for mini wardrobe collections and a 12-month sewing calendar. Get all your measurements sorted with our journal and step-by-step video tutorial, which walks you through how to take each measurement. Download your planner for free at madelabel.co/planner so you can get creative and plan out the wardrobe of your dreams.